feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle and the entire Pacific Northwest. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, you found yourself in the right place. This is where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Weedin, and I'm joined by my co-host, the incomparable Michelle Bomberger. We're excited to bring on a guest today because we're going to be talking some artificial intelligence, some AI. Our guest is Boaz Ashkenazy, founder of Simply Augmented. As a CEO and co-founder of Simply Augmented, Boaz Ashkenazy is a pioneering force in transforming the workplace of the future through the strategic deployment of AI in business operations. Boaz brings a unique perspective that draws on his experience at Meta, where he played a role in developing internal tools to boost employee productivity. Previous to Meta, he was the co-founder of a series of emerging tech startups in the design, e-commerce, and remote meeting space. As one of the driving forces behind Simply Augmented, Boaz is committed to establishing a premier AI-first solutions provider that empowers businesses to harness generative AI for optimizing their core business and workflows. Boaz is also the creator and host of the Shift AI podcast, which is syndicated through GeekWire. The podcast serves as a platform for spotlighting thought leaders who are pushing the boundaries in AI and the future of work. I don't know about you, Michelle, but I'm really excited to welcome in Boaz. Boaz, welcome. We'll be right with you. Everyone, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. You could say we are ubiquitous. Now, before we bring on Boaz. Boy, I'm off to a rough start today, Michelle. I don't know why, but maybe it's because I put my teleprompter in late. Who knows? We're talking AI today. We probably should be talking about the decline of human intelligence. Before we bring on Boaz, Michelle, how are you doing?
I'm good, Dan. It's great to see you.
Great to see you. And you know what? Since I've already flubbed up a couple of times, what do you want to talk about? I always bring up the idea of whatever we're going to banter on. I want to hear what you want to talk about.
Well, one of the reasons why I really am excited about Boaz being on the show is because this concept is everywhere, right? AI is everywhere. If you're on LinkedIn, it's like, this article and that article and this class and that class. And I know that as an entrepreneur, I've spent the last, year plus trying to get my arms around, like, what does this thing look like? And yeah, there's ChatGPT. Okay, yeah, we can do that. There's some marketing tools. Yeah, we can do that. But what is it? And how do I leverage that as a business? And I was just having a conversation with my leadership team around, what are you all reading? Because what we want is for this to be front and center in how we can be more efficient in our work and upskill our team and really do the best work we possibly can. So I'm super excited to hear more because this has been on my mind and I'm having a hard time getting my arms around it.
Well, the interesting thing is ChatGPT is relatively new. I mean, I think it's been a year since I first heard about it. I had no idea what it even meant. Boaz, I want to bring you into this conversation. I know that ChatGPT is a big thing now. Everybody's talking about it, but there's way more to AI than ChatGPT. Could you start by kind of defining for all of us, what is AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, Michelle, it's really nice to be on the podcast. I'm excited to talk to you today. And I really am passionate about this subject, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun to dig into it. When I think about AI, and when I think about why all of the hype, I think about what it can do now that it really couldn't do before. So, AI has been around for a long time. And, when we used things like Amazon and got recommendations and personalization and lots of automation within different structured databases that we are used to using, that was all AI and ML. But what's interesting now that's different is generative AI and the ability for large language models to read unstructured data. And when I say unstructured data, I mean conversations like we're having right now that are transcribed, or podcasts and blogs that are written, and PDFs and things that are not structured in the typical way. all of a sudden we have a computer that can read those things really, really fast and really, really well. And using natural language, we can talk to the computer in ways that we couldn't really before. So it opens up all sorts of possibilities within businesses. We help businesses on their internal workflows. And I always tell businesses, look for all the unstructured data in your company and find out where all the manual stuff is happening. And then you'll be able to target large language models on those things, and you'll see a lot of return on investment.
I think that's a really great start, because when I heard you speak the first time, the idea of unstructured data really sort of jumped out to me, because we have all this stuff. We have emails and we have documents, and in our business, we have executed documents and unexecuted documents. And the process of going and finding that is really time consuming. When you think about, and I know you come from a small business world, so I really appreciate this, because, you know, as the small guy, this is a bit overwhelming. Where would you say are the biggest opportunities, and how does someone get started in thinking about bringing, you know, AI as a big, like, magical thing into their business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was just this morning talking to a bunch of small business owners at the Seattle Chamber of Commerce. And, you know, there's a challenge that you face when you're a small business, because you don't have a ton of resources, but you want to get to value really quickly. And we're living at a time now where you have big cloud providers, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, that are racing after and chasing after each other. And so we benefit from all the innovation that's happening there. And we have all these applications that every day are getting created. And some of them are going to be around, you know, in 3 years, and some of them are not. But, you know, for a little bit of money, we're able to utilize these incredible large language models. I mean, think about Microsoft Copilot. For $30 a month, we can take advantage of these amazing tools that'll integrate it into some of our existing Office systems. $20 a month, we can take advantage of OpenAI's ChatGPT Pro. And I think for a lot of small businesses, that's a great place to start, is just playing around with these tools. The other thing that's really great right now is that there's a lot of educational resources that are free and that big companies are providing. Amazon has a really great AI for executives course that you look up, and it's free. I took it and I got a lot out of it. It's amazing. LinkedIn's doing some free stuff. Google's doing some free stuff. Deeplearning.ai has a ton of content out there. And so there's no shortage of amazing content. And even if you're not a developer, you know, even if you just want to understand how to use these tools and learn how to prompt, I just feel like there's a lot of great, solid resources out there to get started.
So I want to harken back to really what Michelle talked about in the bantering part about learning. And it really, I think, dovetails with your conversation about, just say, ChatGPT, because as a solopreneur, I use it now daily. A year ago, I didn't even know what that meant. And it's completely different today. Heck, it's completely different, I think, than it was like 30 days ago. The rate of what's new is faster than me learning it. And I have to actually carve out and invest time to say, I want to stay on top of this. Talk a little bit about the importance of not overdoing it too much, but learning on a regular basis, investing some time in learning, because you may find out something that could save you hours.
Yeah, this sounds kind of funny, but there's a really great way to use AI to learn that I think is intuitive and using natural language. And I'll give the example of one of our engineers who is, you know, constantly using AI tools to help write code, but then is doing a lot of research on the side as well. And he uses ChatGPT to do research and ask questions. And the conversation that he's having with the machine is pretty fluid. And I think a lot of people miss out on the opportunity to have for the follow-up question when it comes to AI. They'll ask a question, they'll get an answer. It may be good, it may not be good. It's very kind of search-like. Like, I'm going to search for something, I'm going to get results. But the beauty of using ChatGPT for research to learn is that you can have a deep conversation with lots of follow-up questions. And I will do this a lot too, where I say to the machine, I want to learn about X, and I want to have a conversation with you about it. There's going to be some follow-up questions. I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. Are you ready? And it'll answer, yeah, I'm ready. What's your question? And we can just start, you know, having a conversation. If I get those results, I can follow up and say, well, you know, That's interesting what you just mentioned there. Can we talk more about that? And you can go very, very deep with just ChatGPT and learn a lot about lots of different subjects. And I encourage people to do that.
So I love that, because I think that we tend to default to a search, the way that we've been doing searches for, a few decades now, using a browser and using a search engine. And this is different. And if you do get into that conversation, you can see that it is different. And it's kind of scary sometimes, that, you feel like there may be a person there, but there isn't. As a lawyer, we've been fairly conservative about, what we're going to adopt and how we're going to adopt it. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to the risks of using this in certain business environments, and maybe some of the tips and tools for businesses that are stepping into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a question that comes up all the time, around risks, people wanting to use their proprietary data, afraid that if they do, that it's going to get out there and their competitors are going to get it. I would say that if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, buy the paid version. You'll be much safer. If you're super concerned about data in your company, the next level would be to use Azure, AWS, or GCP, Google, and build more custom AI with your proprietary data, because those solutions are pretty secure, I would say. And if you're going to be building applications for your business in those solutions anyway, those cloud providers, AI is going to be just as secure. The next level, and I see some businesses doing this, is using open source tools with their own cloud or on-prem, where they are really, really secure about their data. And I see that happening in situations where companies don't necessarily want to use off-the-shelf tools and just put all of their data into somebody else's cloud. And I get that. So I think there's levels of kind of protection that you can have for your company, but I feel pretty confident with the kind of projects that we do, the custom projects that we do in Azure or AWS environments, using foundational models that say that information is protected, that you can feel pretty confident that your information is protected. The second thing is, I think there should be guardrails inside organizations around how employees should use this technology, how how personal information should be shared in these environments, in the same way that we do for other personal information. We should have rules in place, and everybody should know what those are. We're actually building this for one of our customers. We're actually building a chatbot that has all of the knowledge around what the guardrails are for this particular company, so that employees, if they have a question, can ask the chatbot, "Hey, what do I do in this situation?" And it can give them, return them, the information to use. And so I think that's really important. And we're starting to see task forces inside companies, and that's one of the first things they do, is spin up those guardrails.
Well, we've got guardrails too. We got to pay the bills, Boaz. So we're going to take a short break to do this, just that. We're going to hear from today's Spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, Boaz Ashkenazy, for our Hot or Not section of the show, you may have segued into this. We're going to talk about creating your own GPT. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more from the Shrimp Tank. At Equinox, we believe in the power of law to give business
You don't need to read it.
Pardon me?
We're not live. You don't need to read it.
Thank you. That happened last time too.
Luke, insert here.
That happened last time. I was like, why did I read that? Okay, because she has her own recording of that. So, how about this? For Luke's sake, I will say now back to the show, and you can pick up where you go. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger, and today our guest is Boaz Ashkenazy. For our next segment, we're going to kick off Hot or Not.
Well, I'm not going to I know AI is hot, so we're not even going to go there, Boaz, but we're going to ask you some other questions. We want to know if the concept or the topic is hot or not. At the end, you win absolutely nothing, but we hope you have some fun with it. So I've been having fun with creating my own GPTs. In one case, I put my book in it. That was the first one I did. I downloaded my book so that I could ask it questions related to what was in the book. And now I've created some other GPTs to help me with workflows. So hot or not, creating your own GPTs.
Definitely hot. And I highly recommend people that have the paid version of ChatGPT to try it because it's powerful. It has its limitations for sure, but it's a lot of fun to identify those things that are slowing you down.
So so for an example, if I have a proposal that I want to give, I've actually gone in and I've created the parameters about a proposal, a standard proposal I would use, the different categories. I even gave it a couple recent ones since I use this as an example, so that when I come in after having a conversation, let's say with you, and I've captured it all on my AI reader, and I dump it into there and say, hey, help me out. Let's start with a proposal. It may be as much as 90% done, and then I just have to work on the rest. Something that might have taken me 3 hours might end up taking 20 minutes.
Absolutely. And I think that when people realize how easy it is to do, they'll start creating their own. One of the things that's nice about GPTs is there is a tool, a GPT builder, where if you don't know any code, you can just use your natural language to build these GPTs. And that's really part of the fun. And then you could go in and tweak and fine tune and add more documents and so on. We actually, there's a little feature in GPTs that not a lot of people know about, which are called actions. You can see that at the very bottom. It's a little bit more complicated. It allows for function calling and some code writing, but you can actually elevate GPTs to the next level. We do a lot of these action services, we call them, where you can take regular GPTs and then push the boundaries on what they can do, including being able to make SQL queries and go into your databases and do all sorts of interesting things.
Right, so I have to just laugh about the fact that someone, 20 years ago would listen to this and have no idea like what any of these acronyms are. Like, what is a GPT and what is a so something we didn't hit on much in our first segment was some of your background and history. So I'm curious, hot or not, jumping from big corporate to entrepreneurship.
I would say hot. I spent the first part of my career in startups and in small companies, always as co-founder. And so I had an opportunity to go to Meta, go to a big company, and it was an amazing experience. Very, very different than the small companies I was with before, but super valuable. And I decided to do another entrepreneurial journey, and I'm excited about this next business. But I think that I I learned a ton from being at that organization.
So this is going to be a layup, hot or not. And then I know you're going to say hot, but I want to hear more about what you're doing. Hot or not podcasting?
Hot. I would say that, while I was at Meta, it was a side project. And I did it because I was doing a lot of internal work at Meta building future of work tooling for employees. And I was excited about what the future of work was going to look like. And I was interviewing people in that space, including people at Meta. And when I left, it got picked up by GeekWire and it turned into this whole other animal, maybe a little bit more professional and buttoned up. And the number of guests that have been on the show that have been super interesting has just been a lot of fun. So I'm sure it's like this with you guys too. You get to meet the coolest people and have these conversations, which I get a ton of energy from. So for me, it's been really hot.
All right, hot or not, offshoring. And I asked that because resource allocation for this kind of work is really, really interesting. Like, where do we find the people who can do it? And so the question kind of tees up that idea.
Is the question related to offshoring of AI development or offshoring in general?
Let's do both, but more narrowly AI development.
Yeah, I would say offshoring AI development overseas, I think, is in its infancy. I eventually think that in the same way that application development and mobile development took a little while to take off, the same thing will happen with AI. Right now, there's some aspects of custom AI building that is specialized, but there's going to be a huge number of platforms and tools that come up that make it really, really easy for developers to build on. So I think it's a work in progress. I would say offshoring in general, I would say warm to hot. I think that there was a moment where, as entrepreneurs, we went offshore as a way to offload the kinds of things that were slowing us down, whether it was with assistance or with back of house. AI is that new thing. When we think about all the things that slow us down, and take away our energy, and we're trying to shift into our genius zone, AI is that tool now that can do that. What I'm excited about, and I was just in Manila at an offshore talent company, I'm excited about those two things coming together because I really believe in human-centered AI, where humans are in the loop. Humans are in the loop at the beginning and humans are in the loop at the end. And I think there's a huge opportunity for BPOs and other companies that specialize in offshoring and nearshoring to take advantage of these new tools and supercharge some of these folks that are inside their businesses, and we all benefit from that.
You know, ironically, today, as I was just going through my email, we had today's show on. There was an article in the Washington Post regarding AI video. I don't know if you saw it or not. Hot or not, AI video.
I mean, I would say right now, the announcement of Sora, which was an OpenAI announcement 2 weeks ago, the hottest thing right now in AI. Very surprising that they got to it that quickly. And if folks haven't seen it, I'll describe it, to you on the podcast, which is text to video, long format. When I say long, I mean 30 seconds to 60 seconds of video. And in the same way that we're typing in text and turning that into images, now we can do that with video. Super high results, very, very photorealistic. And I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't think it was going to happen as fast.
That's really neat. I mean, I guess it prompts me with a bunch of conversations because we do a lot of marketing in our business, and you hear about these opportunities, I'll call them, right? These ways of improving efficiency and allowing us to be more creative and do this work better. Does it typically require like a new tool every time? Should we be investing in tools, or is this something that you can do through one tool? I think it's really hard to kind of parse out, yes, I want that. Where do I go find it? Yes, I want that. Where do I go find it? Because they suggest that they're sort of available out there. So kind of how do we evaluate what we can do and where we have to go to do it?
Yeah, I think that it depends. There's going to be some tools within the big providers, Microsoft, Google, that allow you to take advantage of AI in almost every tool that you use. You're seeing this with Salesforce, you're seeing this with Notion, with all these tools. And I just think it's going to be invisible soon. It's just going to be part of what we do. When we write an email, we're going to have a little AI helper there just in case we want to boost that. And everything is going to be like that. When you want something that's very, very specific around the workflows that you do, you could call partners and systems integrators like Simply Augmented that can actually sit down and understand, all right, this is the problem that I'm hearing. This is the effort that it's going to take to create that AI integration. And these are the risks. When you have value, effort, and risk, you can start thinking about, okay, well, maybe that is worth the $20,000 that it's going to cost to do if I can get the ROI on that. And so I always say, painstorm first, right? Because if you understand the problem, then the technology can fall.
So, it actually leads me to a question. I had to change questions in my head because we really haven't talked about how you work with businesses. What kind of businesses do you work with? What is it that you do to help them? So somebody listening says, oh, I got to call Boaz.
We've been working with a lot of professional services companies. We build conversational AI for those companies, and we build custom workflows. Those are the two things. And when I talk to people about AI, most people think about chatbots because of ChatGPT and conversational AI. But there's a lot of power in using large language models to do things that have no conversation associated with them. So I'll give you an example. We built a talent acquisition tool that used large language models to read resumes and then score those resumes against job descriptions and create short lists for humans to be able then to go after and reach out to. So that can happen with any kind of application that you think about, where you have a lot of unstructured data that needs to get read and then scored against some sort of criteria. And we're doing this now for learning and development, where you can have a knowledge base inside your company, inside your course, and you can then create content. You can provide that content to folks and allow them to use natural language to chat and answer those questions using natural language. It can read that, it can score that and assess your answers. And so I think that's a really, really interesting use case. The conversational AI use case and the way that we think about it is we think about building personas into normal chat. So I'll give an example of that is a sales development representative AI that we built for a company. And this sales development representative AI not only answers questions that prospects ask it, but it'll ask questions of the prospects like a good salesperson would. And through this process of conversation, it'll qualify them, summarize all those conversations, and then if qualified, pass it to a salesperson. And so what's nice about that is there is a human in the loop, right? It's a salesperson, but by the time they get a qualified lead, they're not having to waste their time answering questions that they would have otherwise had to answer. So those are some examples of the kinds of tools that we build for folks. And then we also just help businesses if they're going on an AI journey and they're early in the process. And this is true for a lot of people. They've developed a task force. They're trying to figure out how this is going to fit into their business. And they just need to sit down and work through some of this opportunity assessment. Where is the value? Where's the effort? Where's the risk? And we do that as well.
So I know that you come from, again, a small business entrepreneurial background. I'm curious, in your journey from, entrepreneurship to corporate back to entrepreneurship, like what have you found as sort of the thread of like, what gets you up in the morning? What gets you going? What is that kind of core value or inspiration that you find in your business, kind of the thread that flows through?
Yeah, I think that it's different for everybody. But for me, I always kind of think like, what brings me the most energy? And usually what brings me the most energy are the things that I love to wake up in the morning to do. And honestly, it's and this is ironic, I guess, because it's an AI consultancy, but it's being with people. And it's talking to customers, doing discovery, trying to listen to what their problems are. And also, I think that's the reason why I like the podcast so much is I like interviewing people and I'm curious about their journey. And it's funny because of the pandemic and all the things that we had to deal with. It's just so great being able to be in front of folks and having conversations because I think that's where the real strategy is. And I was talking to an entrepreneur today who was trying to figure out their direction and whether to go after this customer, go after this customer, go after this customer. And I said, go out and talk to people. It's so easy for us to get into our heads and whiteboard all these solutions and try to do research and go onto YouTube and so on. Go out and talk to businesses, do discovery, and do it like 50 times. And I guarantee you, if you ask the right questions, you're going to get a signal from the market. Ask people if they would pay you money to do this thing that you're trying to do, and you will get a good answer.
Dan, we can't hear you.
See, that's what happens. Again, human intelligence. The
Good thing we're not live today, buddy.
Yeah, no kidding. So we're going to take our second short break to hear from our sponsors. When we come back with our guest, Boaz Ashkenazy, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to take him back in the DeLorean. That's old school AI. And we're going to ask him some questions about when he was 18. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. And now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger here with Dan Weedin, and our guest today is Boaz Ashkenazy. For our next segment, we're going to kick off Plead the Fifth.
All right, Boaz, Plead the Fifth. We may be turning up the heat a little bit. You can't ask Michelle to plead the fifth. She might be asking you questions. I mentioned we're going to jump in Doc Brown's his time traveling machine and go back to when you were 18 years old, the DeLorean. That's what I was trying to spit out. If you had come to yourself at 18 and said, this is what the world of technology would be like, would you have believed yourself?
Absolutely not. I would not have even been able to think about a world that looks like this when I was 18.
I'm going to follow on the concept of curiosity. So you are invited to a dinner, you know nobody in the room, you sit down next to somebody at the table. What is the first question you ask?
What projects are you working on?
Why that question?
I think it's a better question than what do you do? Because I'm always really interested and curious about what's bringing people energy. And oftentimes that's not work. It's just like, what projects are you working on? What is, what's really getting you fired up? And the other question that I ask sometimes is like, what's lighting you up, or like, what's firing you up right now?
So if you could choose who the next person was, the person who was sitting next to you at that table, who would you choose?
Any person? I had a question recently about who I'd want on the podcast. And, the podcast, I think I told you before, is about the future of work. And there's an individual who has a Netflix episode right now about work. It's kind of documentary style. Ex-president Obama. And I would just, if there's one person I want to sit down with and talk to, he's the one.
Fantastic.
That is great. And I can't wait till you get him on. I think he's probably watching the Shrimp Tank right now, and he's going to be calling you up.
You're watching.
Boaz, we all at certain times have struggled within our own entrepreneurship in a number of different ways. What do you still struggle with?
I think the hardest thing about entrepreneurship is to stay focused. The second hardest thing is distribution. It's like just going to market and kind of winning deals. But staying focused, I think, is one of the hardest things. And I struggle with it. I get excited about things. I get excited about shiny objects. And intuitively, I know that if you just focus on one thing, that you can do the rest of it later, but it's hard to execute on.
Amen. I can relate to that one for sure. So this is an oldie but a goodie for the show. If you had to start a new business, not the one you have, new business, that's based on a hobby of yours, what would that business be?
It would be related to food, cooking, and travel. And I was recently in London, and I went on a food tour through the city, through East London. And it was the most amazing experience. You get to mix the history of the place with the food, and you get to eat along the way. And I think that would be an amazing business to run.
Michelle, you're killing me. I was going to ask that one, so I have to go to another oldie but goodie. You mentioned Netflix. Maybe you're a binge watcher of shows. What's your most recent binge watch?
The most recent binge watch was on Hulu, and it was Bear, which is a show about cooking, and it's about a guy that came back to his family business in Chicago to run the operation, but he came from like a very fancy. He was a sous chef at a very fancy restaurant and came back home to work in this kitchen. It's amazing.
It is astounding. It is an absolutely astounding show. They've won a ton of awards this year too, which is so exciting. So highly recommend that one. They're filming season 3. So can't wait for it to come out.
Yeah, me too.
All right, one more. And it again goes to kind of the kind of curiosity piece. What is your reaction to the word impossible?
I always think that there's ways to figure out an alternate path. Nothing is impossible. And so when I hear that word, just think, well, we haven't asked enough questions.
I love it. So Boaz, thank you so much for being a guest here on the podcast today on the Shrimp Tank. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you or learn more about Simply Augmented, how can they get more information?
There's a couple different ways. One, simplyaugmented.ai is the company website. You go to simplyaugmented.ai, you'll get a lot of information about me and my co-founders. Boaz at simplyaugmented.ai is an easy way to get in touch with me. Shift AI podcast.com is a way to learn about the podcast. And Shift AI is on all the major podcast platforms. So check that out. There's some great episodes. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. X.
Fantastic. And And for our listeners, make sure you check out all the replays at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle or wherever you get your podcasts, iHeart, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and follow our social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Boaz, this has been a treat. Like I mentioned to you before we got started, I'm really fascinated by AI and trying to integrate it myself. I learned a whole lot. I'm going to start listening to your podcast. Thank you. Michelle, as always, great to see you. We'll see you next month. Everybody do what Michelle said. Like us wherever you want to like us. But if you're on Facebook, we are normally live streaming every Wednesday at 12 p.m. unless technology makes it impossible for us to do it. Our next guest will be Wednesday, March 6th. He will be Dave Gailey from Sparta Services. My co-host will be Craig Swanson. In the meantime, be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.